So actually, what I would like to tell you a little bit is how this all came about. So Hans and me have been presenting about portrayals for a while, and we were getting into all this business of how to actually conceptualize portrayal, having this ambition to try and put together a book, which we are still trying, about portrayals and all that. And while we were doing that, actually, we were doing it by looking at many, many tapes all the time, tapes of our patients, tapes of supervisees' patients, and trying to figure out what was working and what was not working, and how do we actually guide therapists through portrayals, and how do we guide patients through portrayals. And while we were actually thinking of how to write this the introduction and looking at some theoretical issues, what actually happened is that this kind of map emerged, like when you're looking at a landscape and suddenly you see a pattern. And we actually saw that we can divide or kind of categorize human pain, which is the basic thing that we are all trying to help people with and transform. We can actually categorize it into 3 categories of pain, which are like 3 families. And what we're going to show is actually that these 3 families of pain really act like families. They have these family traits. So each family of pain or category of pain has kind of a specific typical pain. It has its specific transformative path. And that's really what is very interesting. So if we can actually define the pain, actually where it comes from, what are the typical events that create this kind of pain, where it happens, and then if we see that, we can actually guide the portrayal into a transformative path, which will help this pain heal. So this is like a navigator in a way. Now, it's very important. This is not like a model which we look at a patient and we say what pain he has. Everybody has all kinds of pains, all the 3 types, okay? What we're talking about is really in coordinates with experiential work. And it is, we are looking for what pain is active now in this session. This is really, really, really important because all of us have pains of all the different types. We have all these pains, but at a specific moment, there is one pain which is more active now and has been activated and is the one which will be most fertile to transform in order to heal the patient. So this is it's not about conceptualizing a patient. It is about helping us conceptualize what is actually happening in the session and choosing the path to continue on. And I think all of us have the experience of being in a session and then something's come up and we're saying, is this, where do I take it? I can now do some enactment toward the parent, or I can stay with the patient and do some self-to-self work, or I can maybe resource him and do something else. So there are all these interventions, and what we're actually aiming to do is really help you identify the pain and transform. And I think once we've been working with it, and I will introduce it, this is the basic idea. And it does, as Hans will show us in a few minutes, really, really sits very well with the idea of transformation through the process of memory reconsolidation, which Hans will soon introduce to us. So anything I forgot, Hans?
I don't think so.
Introduction?
I think we can start.
Yeah, okay. And we're really excited about this.
Yes.
And yeah,
so yeah, thank you very much for coming. All these known faces, it's really a treat. I'm really glad that you're interested in listening what we have to say, and we hope it's worthwhile for you and that you'll be as enthusiastic as we are about it. And we also are really hoping that we can have a discussion, also things that you don't understand or things that really make sense to you. We really would like to have some time in the end of each part to talk with you. So I'm going to talk shortly about memory reconsolidation. I mean, most of you are probably familiar with memory reconsolidation as a crucial process that is important in psychotherapy. But we're going to, what we're going to argue is that memory consolidation is actually underlying these three transformational paths that we identified, but that it's actually a little bit different for each pain, this memory consolidation. So when emotional pain is intense or repeated, we learn that certain experiences or interactions are painful, and this is learned from emotional.
As you don't want to.
I know. We'll go there. And this learned emotional pain that starts repeating itself. That's actually what we want to do in psychotherapy. Now I'm going to start my slides now because I wanted to say this, seeing you. Now I'm going to see less of you when I'm starting this. Okay, can you see well the slides?
Not now, we can't see anything. You didn't share, Hans.
Okay, hold on. I'll do it again.
You're not sharing screen. No, now you are.
No, and now I have to do it like this. Okay, now you'll see it, right? Okay. Okay. Now, the big new understanding that memory consolidation actually gave us in comparison to existing techniques, like for instance exposure, is that it's not enough to have a new learning experience. We don't need anything new only, but we first need to activate the old learning. We need an embodied experience of emotional pain. And this is difficult and doesn't happen spontaneously, because when we notice pain, when people notice pain, we instinctively try not to feel it. So we know now not accessing pain means no permanent transformation. As Greenberg said, you can't leave a place before you've arrived there. And when we activate the painful memory, it can be reconsolidated, which is a fancy word for rewriting it in memory with a different emotional loading or meaning. Now, let's have a little picture here to see this in a simplified version. This is classical conditioning. When a mouse pairs, where the mouse pairs the reaction to electric shock with a sound, and then the sound alone will cause the same reaction in the last mouse. Now, if we want to unlearn this, traditionally, for many years, what we did was use exposure. So we learned that the bell does not necessarily lead to the shock. But the problem is that the unlearning often doesn't stick. And just like in therapy, we often notice that patients improve temporarily, but then they relapse. So that's because we didn't eliminate or change the old learning, but actually created a new one. So if we look at the full picture, now we first activate the old memory, in this example by pairing once more the shock with the bell. And now the outcome is different and more stable. In psychotherapy, this would correspond to remembering the painful event or memory or emotional state before we go to the new healing experience. Now, we don't create a new memory, but actually change the memory that already existed. Now, Acker has called these three steps reactivation of the memory, the experience of the mismatch, where the experience disconfirms the old learning, and erasure by confronting repeatedly these incompatible experiences. Now, if we translate this into psychotherapy, we get the following. Transformative sessions in experiential therapies seem to have a sequence in common. We activate some intense painful emotion, some memory, or some problematic emotional state. So we arrive at the deepest pain. When we apply a therapeutic procedure, we apply a therapeutic procedure to find or to promote a new contrasting emotional experience. To really anchor this in memory, we use procedures like juxtaposing contrasting experiences or meta-processing the new experience. Now, therapy uses rather similar techniques for the first and the last step, but it is the middle piece, the finding of the new experience, where therapies are most different from each other. For instance, look at these examples. See how different these procedures can be. In some therapies, the therapist is relationally very present. In others, they are more technical. They may work with eyes open or closed. They may work directly with the therapist or with imagined others. And also, therapies have different focus. Some therapies work more with the body, others on relationships. Some may use imagination or focus on emotion or on cognition. Am I going too fast, or is this a good? Okay.
It's okay.
Now, Netta and I make use of portrayals. We're ADP therapists to create novelty. We really like portrayals because they're a very easy way to do memory consolidation. They're flexible and they use imagination. On the one hand, it's easy to activate the pain, to really go to this first very important step of finding the pain. And on the other hand, it's very creative and easy to use in this middle step to create a new contrasting experience. But while writing a book on portrayals, like Netta said, we stumbled on the problem that there are not really clear criteria of when to do what in this middle step. So first, there are many types of portrayals, and the options for setting up a portrayal are endless. So when do we do what? We would either follow the client, or normally we would either follow the client, for instance, by listening to the needs or what is emerging spontaneously, trusting this moment-to-moment process. And working in this way very often produces good results, but not always. And we could distinguish different kinds of novelty when we were looking at our portrayals, like regulation, expression, reception, separation, compassion, and integration. But we didn't have a framework to understand why we would choose, why it went that way, or if another kind of new experience might have been more effective. So intuition and experience somehow informed us where to go. Netta and I would also usually agree on which would be the most transformative setup and what kind of novelty had been helpful. But again, we could not explain exactly why. Now, I'm a believer in intuition, and I even wrote an article about the role of intuition in psychotherapy, but it's not very satisfying to write this in a book, like it will come with experience or just follow your intuition. So we wanted some kind of structure to guide our choices. And that was our 3 triangles of pain. I need one piece of paper.
Lost.
Yeah, the technology wasn't working as we expected. So, yeah. Okay. So when we started to think along the lines of emotional pain, we understood that we might have found something really important, which is actually larger than just setting up the portrayals. We believe it can be actually a very important tool for psychotherapy integration, and it has some new important implications for memory consolidation. Now, I will get back to that later, but first, now, be ready for Netta to talk about 3 triangles of emotional pain.
Okay. So I will actually present the 3 triangles of pain. I will do it, of course, shortly. You also have the handouts. I'm just going to use very little presentation. I'm just going to show each triangle, and then I'm going to stop the share and talk because I need faces to concentrate. So And you have much of the information is in these handouts that I hope everybody got. And if somebody didn't get a handout, you can write the mail and they will do it for you. So let's go. I hope this is the right thing that I'm opening. Wait. Okay. This we already did. Okay, so triangle 1. Okay, so this is the triangle that we call the triangle of core emotional pain. Are you seeing the slide okay? Okay, good. So this is the triangle that we call a triangle of core emotional pain. Core, basic, we can find the exact word. In ADP, we use core emotional pain. And what we see here is actually, we will see that each system or each family of pain has some kind of core pain, which is very different from one family to the other. And then each of these families of pain or categories has a specific anxiety that actually happens and is connected to this core pain. And we will see a specific defense that comes with it. So the first pain, which we call core emotional pain, is actually pain which comes from very intense emotion that the person, while this is happening, cannot tolerate. People feel that if they feel this intense pain, it can be intense loss or intense fear or intense rage or any kind of very intense emotion. And they feel that if they feel this emotion, once they start feeling it, they feel it so intensive, it just can disintegrate them. And so automatically they start having the anxiety or the fear of disintegration or annihilation or any of these words. We just really feel, if I feel this, I die. If I feel this, I collapse. If I feel this, I can't handle it. And so what happens is that the defense that comes up when this kind of pain comes would be naturally the defense that you can see here, which is the dissociation, right? So if I feel this pain, I dissociate. If I start feeling it, I dissociate and I stop feeling it. Or if I know that there are all these circumstances that I might feel this pain, I avoid getting into them, right? So if I have some trauma, and we will talk basically here, and I will stop the share now so I can see you. You have the triangle, right? So, and you have it on the handouts also, so we can work without it, okay? So actually what we're saying here is that this pain happens to people when they are actually in circumstances or in a specific event, usually a specific event or a specific set of events where they encounter severe pain. It can be a loss, okay? Maybe a person who loses his spouse and he just comes into the clinic and he says, if I feel the pain, I'm gonna collapse, I can't. Or he might come, like I have a patient who just came after her husband was killed in a car accident, and she actually came to the clinic and she said, listen, I'm not feeling anything. I'm totally numb. I don't dream about him. I can't even remember his face. And I know why. If I will only start doing this, that's going to be the end. Or another patient which lost his wife and said, if I feel this, if do you think I'm a robber? There's something wrong with me. He actually came with some self-attack, but the core of the issue was, what's wrong with you? I'm not feeling anything. I'm totally numb. So people might come to the clinic with either being overwhelmed or being disconnected or avoiding situations. This patient of mine that also had the car accident also was avoiding driving, because whenever she started driving, she'd get these visions of this terrible car accident and her husband just smashing through the window. So she could not tolerate this and she wouldn't come. So this would be the what we call triangle 1 of core emotional pain. And the problem is that actually the person does not have the resources to process this pain. He cannot feel it, so he stops. He feels, if I feel it, I die. And another important issue here is that as we are younger, babies or young kids, we actually encounter more of these pains because we don't have much resources. So as we get older, it should be more traumatic events. But for a young child, like operations, or maybe even for a young child losing his pet, could bring pain that he cannot tolerate. And if there is nobody there to help him, which is another issue, but first, if he's there and he has to deal with it alone, he is dealing with pain that he cannot process. So if we understand this is a family of origin of pains, that means situations, circumstances, events where the person was actually some very, very strong pain was activated and he could not process it or tolerate it, and he either dissociated or avoided. And what is learned is a very strong association between triggers. They can be triggers from the world, or they can be the emotion itself can be the trigger. And in a very classic association, this is associated with the anxiety of disintegrating. And so the defense, which comes very fast, is a defense of dissociation or avoiding or anything that can help me. And sometimes people will actually really be numb just to not feel some specific emotion, which was too big, too hard. And in ADP, we say too early, too alone, too much, too early, too alone, or whatever, however we want to say it, right? So we can see that this kind of pain, which is a specific family of pain, has a specific transformation. It's quite easy to understand what's a transformation. The problem was that there were not enough resources, right? So what would the transformation be? We go back to the event, we activate the pain, right? It sounds easy, but sometimes can be very hard because we have to go through the dissociation, right? Have to overcome it. So we activate the pain. We can do it via portrayal, or we can do it via flashback, or whatever is happening. And then we have to resource the patient so that he has enough resources to actually feel the emotion. We say in ADP, feel the emotion to completion, or regulate the emotion until it ends, or another emotion, and more adaptive come on, like in EFT, changing emotion by emotion. It doesn't matter how we call this, but we actually have to stay with the patient with this very intensive emotion while we are helping him resource. How do we resource? First thing, simplest, our presence. We are there. We're kind of an older, wiser, more capable. We're not in the situation, right? We're only going back there. So we're going to use ourselves to resource the patient. We can also use other resources. We can use in imagination, we can do many things. We can even get the help of Almighty God, or we can have the help of a grandmother, or we can have the help of the adult self, which maybe can deal with it if we're going through something very, very hard, which was very hard during infancy, but today is maybe different. So we are going to actually work with resourcing the patient. So the relationship between the therapist and the patient here, the therapist is actually a resource. It's not so much about who he is or what are his feelings. He is just there. Of course, he's, you know, kind and compassionate and loving, but the idea is that he's actually helping the patient resource himself and transform. So this would be the first family of pains. And as I say, what would the markers be? The markers would be either patients dissociating or patients flooded. Many times patients come in, I can't sleep. I have this, and actually what they're feeling is this kind of inhalation anxiety. Something triggered this kind of pain and the anxiety. We can see that in all the markers we're going to show. If we look at the triangle, each crown, is that true to say crown of the triangle? Is that the right word?
Corner.
What?
Corner.
Corner, right, easier, okay. So each angle or corner of the triangle can be a marker. So we can say, see the person coming with severe agony that he cannot tolerate. We can see the person coming with very strong anxiety, panic attacks, sleeping problems, whatever, okay. And we can see the defense, either dissociation, numbness, okay, or severe avoidance of specific situations. And if it's something that has to happen, like my patient with driving, then that's a big issue, okay? Of course, some people, and we know it, will come with this thing activated because something happened now, but the big mess happened back then, right? So somebody can come now because of a loss of a friend, but then when we go back, he lost his parent, or he lost his sister or brother, or he was in some kind of war area, and we have to go back and to see when this was learned. So this is the first triangle, and I think I said everything. Yeah.
Let me just add one thing, which I think is also illustrative. Most of the examples you gave of what you can use for resourcing who came from ADP is more the presence, but you can also think about SE things like some somatic experiencing, like titration. Do it slowly, do it bit by bit. Do it in imagination from a distance, for instance, or in black and white. All these things you can do to regulate and keep it in the window of tolerance, so that the people can go from this bad place into the new place in a better place, and can really process this whole thing to completion in a regulated fashion, which is what they couldn't do at the time. And then this new state, this regulated state, will be reconsolidated into the memory, which was felt like terror before, and now can be felt like something which is manageable.
So thank you for that. That's very important. And one, I had another idea, it flopped away. So okay, next, we'll probably come back.
It'll come back. Let's go to triangle 2.
So this is actually, so we said something about this triangle 1, or one more thing. This is what I said, that sometimes it's important. The emotion has an action tendency, right? So going through the emotion is actually letting the action tendency. So we can think about loss and the action tendency with just being, feeling the pain and crying. But if it's rage, for example, so the action tendency can be something else, right? It can be a revenge, or if it's fear, the action tendency can be running away or hiding, etc. So that's another, or if it's disgust, the action tendency can be vomiting, or expelling whatever is there. So we can see these basic strong emotion, then that's triangle 1.
Yeah, and it also is going from immobilization to mobilization. That then when you get the action tendency back online. Yeah.
Okay, so this is like we can core emotional pain, or kind of the trauma triangle, etc. Now we're going to triangle 2. I'll share screen again for a moment. Why isn't this moving? There we are. Okay, so this we call relational pain. And this is actually part of the attachment paradigm that we're all talking about a lot, and is very and is very known. But this is a different kind of pain. And I want to actually say, if triangle 1 pain was actually between the person and like the organism in itself, right? It's something that is happening inside and I cannot process. Here we're in a different story. We call it relational pain because the pain actually exists between the person and his attachment figure, or if to be more accurate, his internalized attachment figure. When we're seeing him now, right? He has internalized some of the attachment figure. And so we can see, and I'll go over the triangle and stop the share then. We can see, can you see my cursor, right?
Yeah.
So we can see the bottom of the triangle. We actually have, or I'll say one more thing. So this triangle actually exists in this conflict between this, natural tendency of people to express themselves, to express their needs, to get their needs met, okay, to kind of fulfill their needs, express themselves, express their emotions. We're talking about basic expression of emotions, of needs. This is the kind of expression. And this is conflicted with this big issue that human beings or social animals or family animals need, is to be connected to their attachment figure. And they have to they have to cherish and they have to save this connection all the time. They cannot live without it. So we're actually talking about this big drama that is happening between this tendency to express yourself and this need, this very strong need for connection, which is a survival need, just like not breaking down. So we're actually, this is actually the tension that we're talking about here. And so the pain would be whenever we're aware or we have the need to express emotions or needs, which were unacceptable in different ways by our attachment figure. Now, this is important. This doesn't just go to one specific event, okay? This is much larger. Usually we would go to like a typical event, something that would happen many times. It can be one event, but that's very rare. Usually we will have kind of a typical event. I felt anger, and when I was angry at my mother, she would say, stop this, or would not say anything, or ignore me, or even punish me, okay? So I have these memories, these events that kept on coming, which I could not express, because when I expressed, I got either, and we say in ADP, Deanna calls it errors of omission of commission, either I was not given what I was needed in any way, or I was attacked for expressing this need or this emotion. And the defense here, as you saw in the triangle, is the defense of suppression. So what I do is I try to suppress this kind of emotion. That's usually what I would try to do. And of course, defenses have this tendency to get more and more sophisticated. So we can see that in order to suppress an emotion, we can also put another emotion instead. So it will be very classic that I cannot express anger, but I express sadness instead, or all these kinds of tricks that I do. What do we see on the patient actually? Or if we understand the basic event, and I think we all have it because we've talked about it so many times, right? This trauma or this relational pain. What we actually see on the patient usually, or should I go first to the transformation? Maybe I'm sorry. So if we understand what the pain is, basically this family of pains, okay, we're going to the transformation. So if the problem was I could not, I have to suppress my need, or I have to express my urge to express myself, my emotions, right? And I'm afraid of losing the connection with my parent. So the transformation, again, is very clear. I have to have two ingredients in this transformation. Then they both have to happen. Doesn't matter in which, it's not a matter of what happens first or next, but usually we will have first ingredient, some kind of expression. And the expression now is not just the expression towards myself. I have to express this to whoever was the person who did not let me express. So I will have to express this towards an attachment figure. It can be, of course, an imagination. It can be an internalized attachment figure, but I do have to have a real expression. So it's not only about feeling the anger like we would do in triangle 1, right? So that only feeling the pain is transformative. Here it's a different story. The emotion has to be expressed towards the attachment figure. Okay, it can be either the pain I couldn't express, the needs of being loved or having warmth or being close or whatever, okay, and the emotions that I could not express. So first ingredient in this cake of triangle 2 would be expression, right? Needs and emotions. But there is a second ingredient, which is not less important, and that is actually creating the reconnection, right? Because we remember the problem was losing the connection. So now we have to have a reconnection. And for that, we have actually 3 options. One is the nice story, right? The patient expresses his needs or expresses his emotion, and we have a transformation in imagination of the attachment figure, of the internalized attachment figure. And the parent says, well, I never knew this was so painful for you. I'm so sorry. I love you, blah, blah, blah. Or I'm so happy that you're now expressing your anger, right? So the parent in imagination transforms, right? This is happening experientially. It just doesn't happen. No, we have to do it, right? And this is one way. So we have a reconnection, the easy reconnection. The other option is that we have the expression and the parent doesn't totally transform, but the patient can see in a different way the behavior of the parent. So, okay, so my father never expressed his love, but now when I express my need of love, I can see that he does love me because he feels pain at the fact that I never got the love, or because he had these good intentions, but he didn't exactly know how, or whatever variation. So I can use now this imaginal process in order to get the parent to express a deeper emotion that he could not express before, or at least the intention to express it. And that's another transformation. And the saddest story, which also happens, is that the parent cannot transform and the patient cannot see the circumstances in which the parent can give it to him. And we go to kind of a mourning process, which I can say I always needed this love and I never got it from my parent, okay? Or where I could never express anger towards my parent because it would become dangerous. And I can then feel the grief and the mourning over that, and then I internalize I re-internalize my attachment figure, but after I've gone through the mourning. So these would be the three basic transformations. Oh, I didn't say anything about the outcome, so we'll see it in the tapes. But the outcome will be that the person is freer in expressing. People would feel stronger, would feel more capable, would feel more authentic with themselves, and we can see them feeling more connected. Because what are the markers, right? So again, we go to the different corners of the triangle, angles, crowns, whatever we want to call them, right? And we can see, so some patients will come with strong emotions that they cannot express. Like, I'm furious at my husband, but I never say it, or I cry instead of rage, or this. So we can see them coming with the bottom of the triangle kind of active. Some patients, and that's very common, come with a suppression. We just see they're never angry, or they're never sad, or they can't express any kinds of fragile emotions, or like be soft, or need anything. They cannot express any needs of closeness or something. So they're very suppressed in this. Or they can be altogether saying things like, well, I don't really need connection. I'm totally self-sufficient. And they actually avoid intimacy, and they cannot find themselves in intimate relationships. Or we can see them actually very, very afraid of losing connection. Like the person that's coming in and his girlfriend didn't answer his WhatsApp for, I don't know, for 5 minutes. No, okay, I know she's not into me anymore. I can't handle it. And we're seeing them obsessed with connection, and very, very needy and very obsessed with the connection. And of course, this triangle, we can see it's active usually when issues with this specific attachment person in this life, in this time for this patient, like it can be with his husband or children or other attachment figures, which are relevant in this story. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is the other. Yes, Hans.
Yeah, I wanted to add another like big change, which we can also often see, like because of all these relational ruptures that people went through when they had neglect or rejection or abuse, they're kind of expecting that their needs will not be met, and they won't even express their needs. And when in a portrayal or in this work there is a reception of the things that were actually needed, what will happen is that people start to expect more and express more and ask more and receive more, and actually allow themselves to receive good things that they didn't receive before. So this whole receptive capacity is also one of the things that can happen there. I mean, it's everything that has to do with all these interpersonal things all belongs here, and it can take many forms.
But basically interpersonal with attachment figures, because we will see triangle 3 working with interpersonal with figures who are not.
No, exactly. It's
which are these other. They can be also attachment, but they're not necessarily. Okay. Yeah. So this is also all this. This is a whole world, of course, and we do have different classical portrayals, or in EFT, this is the classical unfinished business task that we see, right? expressing to the parent and then going to the parent chair and in portrayals, many different ways to do it. And also this has a lot of, a lot of things we can do in the relationship with the patient, as long as we are his attachment figure for this session, okay? Not all patients create these kind of relationships, but many patients who have issues with the relational triangle with a relational pain, will start regarding us as attachment figures. So also working experientially in the relationship can be very helpful in this triangle, and transforming it inside the relationship, like being angry at the therapist or expressing the needs towards the therapist, and frustration and all that can be really, really metabolized. And we can talk about it for the whole day, but I think we have the point. So, but what I want to say, this is really important, because if we think of this anger, for example, towards the parent, right? If we look at it in triangle 1, maybe very strong rage towards the parents that I cannot tolerate, that's a different intervention than in triangle 2. I have this anger at my parent, or even rage, God forbid, but that also happens sometimes, and I have to express it. That's a very different thing. In expression, there is a person who is getting your message. This is not just letting the emotion happen. This is a dialogue, okay? So this is very important for the transformational process, and it's very different work, okay? Very, very different work, different portrayals, etc. Okay? Okay. Triangle 3. How am I with the time? Because I totally lost it, Hans. I don't remember.
We're quite good. I think
good.
still,
Okay.
well, you would have another 20 minutes for triangle 3.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. So we'll go to the triangle 3, which is the more complex one, and maybe the one that I think was less defined specifically in terms of experiential work. So I'll just share for a moment the slide of the triangle. Okay, so this is triangle 3, which we call self-pain. And this is very, very important. The pain exists autonomically between the self and the self. You don't need anybody else to activate it. It's already internalized inside you. That's very, very important. And the pain is actually manifestation or awareness of flawed traits or aspects of self. Aspects of myself which I learned are not good. In what sense not good? There are aspects of the self which were not valued or were attacked by other members of society, of course, including my parents, but also my brothers and sisters, and also my peers, and also my friends in school, and maybe today all the Facebook community or whatever. Okay, so this is about my relationships to society. Parents are very important here, but we're talking about self-concepts that were already internalized. And I don't need anybody to make me think this. I do it totally by myself. Okay, I have these concepts about myself, which are extremely painful. And all of us know these very, very painful concepts. So this is the bottom of the triangle. This feeling of defectiveness, of I'm shit. Okay, I'm really like very bad. And the fear is that if I manifest these traits, and if I manifest these aspects of myself, what will happen? What am I afraid of? What is the anxiety? The anxiety is what we will call fear of unworthiness or exclusion. Because if I'm not worth enough, I'm not good enough to be part of the society. I will be expelled. I would be marginalized. I will be ignored. I will be put aside. And I will feel this shame, humiliation, and feeling of I'm not good enough. So our idea of being good enough or being worth enough or having this idea that our identity is good enough is critical in order to form connections in society. And that's also survival, because people are not just family creatures, they are social creatures. And we all need society in order to actually live and thrive and survive. Okay? And the defense here is very complicated, okay? But the basic thing is that I try not to manifest these self-aspects. I try to attack them, to hide them from myself, to hide them underneath this shame kind of curtain, and not know them and not feel them and of course, not show them. So I'm hiding them from everybody. But if I really want to keep a secret, what do? I hide it from myself. So we can see different levels of defenses and different levels of hiding. And of course, one of the best ways to hide something is to actually have kind of a camouflage. So I can also have like an opposite reaction. If I feel stupid, I can show myself as if I'm the smartest person, or I feel insecure, I can try and show myself as secure. Okay, that's another thing. And the mechanism of self-attack is the mechanism that helps me not manifest it. I talk to myself, you're bad, don't show this, you can't, don't do this, you're bad if you're doing this. And then that's the way I cope, okay? So this is actually basic triangle 3. Hans, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I can add one more thing. So this is where we also did all of the things of the narcissism come in, and when people are really compensating and making themselves bigger than they actually are, to hide from themselves and to impress others. And that's very quickly we notice this, like either the person is really insecure or they're overly secure. And then we know, okay, so now we're in this realm. And another thing I wanted to add, just to get the whole picture before what it is for, this self-pain, is we basically, these 3 types of pain, they have an evolutionary function. So this first pain is actually taking care of the organism. These emotions that take care of, there's danger, and it takes care about taking care of your body, that you don't die, that you don't get annihilated. The second part is taking of another area of our lives, which is crucial for survival, which is taking care of our attachment figures, that we are safeguarded with them. And then this is the bigger one, which is the whole society. Here we can, all these things that are now very in fashion, like discrimination, identity, all these things belong in this. This is, are we a worthy member of the society? Do we feel excluded? Do we feel, this safeguards another area of survival. Are we protected by our group, by our peers, by our friends? And this is a very important, so I think it's the 3 of them together, you can see that each of them protects a different kind of crucial area, crucial for survival.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if we're in this, it also has to do with developmental anxieties. We can see the different developmental anxieties. I don't know if you all know them, which also are there. The first anxiety of the fear of getting disintegrated. The other one is losing love or losing the connection, the fear of losing love, and then the fear of being bad, as the 3 basic paradigms around this. But this is like another. But let's go back to triangle 3 into self-pain, okay? Because again, we are seeing here that this pain is kind of this little relationship we have with ourselves. What is the relationship I have with all these different aspects of myself? Okay, and the problem is that I have all these aspects, which I'm sure that if I show them, I'm going to be expelled, and I am working so hard to hide them. And I am suffering so much for thinking that I'm flawed in all these ways. And I think each of us can, like in 2 minutes, find, well, at least I can find like 10 different things that I am all the time, you know, okay, I'm presenting and ta-ta-ta, but if they will know the truth about me, oh my God, what will they all think? So we all have this kind of voice, and that is self-pain. And I think we all see it in the clinic a lot, and it's a tough one to transform. So how do we transform? If we go back a moment to the idea of memory.
So you first have to say the 3 ways that this pain is created, I think.
Okay, thank you, Hans.
Yeah.
Please help me with that. Okay, so the 3 ways that this pain, this is really important, okay? This pain can happen in many different situations, which are like 3 basic ones we've been talking about. Is first, it can happen even in what we call the trauma or a triangle 1 situation, when I feel very, very weak and I internalize my weakness or my helplessness as part of my identity. It can also happen, and it's very common that it happens in the attachment relationship, when I get attacked by my parents for different aspects of myself. You're too fat, you're talking too much, you're too loud, you're not, I don't know, you're too weak, you're a crybaby, you're a fearful
female
boy.
to male.
What?
To female
to male, whatever, okay? So we get these messages also from the family. Many times the parents are talking to us about these things because they're trying to protect us for being removed from society, right? They're actually, that's what they have to do. They're social agents who are helping us socialize us. And the third cause can be from actually interactions with other members of society. Brothers and sisters are very important here, but also peers in school. People being, bullied or expelled from, just, I don't know, the ones who still have young girls or boys, people being taken out from this WhatsApp group again and again, or not invited to a party, and all that, okay, in different degrees. All these things also can actually form these kind of self-concepts. Another thing which is important about self-concept, and I'm not going to go in it because this is a very complicated cognitive idea of how we create concepts. It's important to know that self-concepts are created when you become between 7 and 9. It doesn't mean that the events that created them happen when you're 7 or 9, okay? The concepts are starting to being materialized and created around age 7 and then till we die all the time, because this is like a complex cognitive process. But the child starts to think about himself and who he is when he's around this age. Before that, it's still very liable. The boy, if you ask a boy, are you good in sports? And he's 5 years old. So one week he'll say yes. And the other day he'll say no, because he didn't score a goal. Okay, but when he's 7, he can start saying things about himself, how smart he is, how pretty he is, how, I don't know, how kind he is, and all that, okay? So we actually, many times when we go back to the concept with patients and try to understand where this concept is coming from, many times we find ourselves going back to this really interesting age of beginning of elementary school. And I'm sure we all met this in portrayals. Like from when do you think from when do you have this feeling about yourself? Of course, it can be later, but many times we go to this crucial age, okay? Because this is where the identity actually is starting to form around these self-concepts. And there's a lot to say about this, but I'm not gonna go because I wanna go to the transformation, okay? So we're going back to the transformation. What do we do with this big mess? So this is really interesting, because since this is happening between self and self, we are going to transform it using self-to-self interaction. Okay, so these are what's called intrapsychic portrayals, right? I'm saying the right word, right? We're going inside, one part of us, the self, talking to another part. This or talking or interacting in dialogue, in deep dialogue with another part. And what needs to happen there is actually quite a complex process. We have to get right memory consolidation. We have to activate the bad feeling of how it is that when I felt that, let's say, you stupid, okay, we'll see a movie about somebody who thinks he's not smart enough. So later, so I'm not smart enough. I don't have this. I'm like kind of stupid, so the pain connected, but also we really, really want to nail down the concept, because people don't come with these concepts nailed down. They have like a kind of a general idea of how they're flawed or how they're not good enough. And we really want to go back and to identify the specific self-concept. And more than that, we really need to understand how did, and I'll talk about a child or whatever, a young adult, how did you create this self-concept? How did it happen? What was happening in your life that you learned about yourself that you are like this? Okay, and I want to get to arrive at the pain and the self-concept. I will exemplify this in a video afterwards, okay? But now, when I'm back there and I can see how the 8-year-old or the 7-year-old or whatever, if we go back earlier, the 5-year-old is feeling that he is a bad boy or that he's not smart enough, right? He has a very immature concept of the world and of himself. Young children tend to make overgeneralizations or undergeneralizations, and they don't get it exactly what is important and what is not. They're living their specific life. And as grown-ups, we have a lot of other perspective. So when now we start having a dialogue between this figure, the smarter, older figure, and that part, what we see is we're starting to, after we're connecting and understanding, we're starting a process which we call in general reassessment, okay? And the adult self is reassessing the judgment and the conceptualization and the feeling of the young part. And now he's helping the person reintegrate the events and the learnings into a more mature learning. So I'll just give the easiest example. If I felt stupid because I had learning disabilities, okay, I'm just giving the simplest example so it will be clear. And I go back to this child and how he was frustrated and how he was failing again and again. And he sees all these disappointed faces on his parents and teachers. And he feels, oh, I'm just not smart enough. I'll never make it. And he's very painful. And now he knows he has a learning disability, right? But he didn't know it then. And I go back and I do this dialogue when everything is experienced and live, and then we have this dialogue, and then the adult self can actually help the young self reevaluate and reassess his learning and his feelings, and we have a transformation. Okay, so the therapist is very important because he's facilitating this whole process, and I will show this afterwards. But actually the transformation is happening between the adult self and the young self, and the therapist is helping the patient do it in many, many ways. Okay, so in this transformation, we have actually two processes. We have identifying and awakening the negative self-concept, which we do by empathic inquiry or by a portrayal or some kind of way. And then we do the reassessment. Now, the trick is that sometimes these bad traits, and I can say for myself, some of them are really bad traits. What do we mean? They are not very adaptive for really, becoming part of society. And so maybe as a young child, I thought that's terrible and I'll never find any place for myself and I'll be really bad. But still today, I'm still suffering from this, whatever bad trait is, right? So part of the work in the reassessment would also be reassessing, right? The value of this bad trait and accepting it by kind of a process of mourning. Okay, so if I can say, if let's take the fact, let's again go to this learning disability boy just because it's easy, okay? And we'll go back, and maybe he is a slow thinker because of his learning disability. And that is very hard for him, and that's hard everywhere, and it's still hard, and it's gonna be hard, okay? So we will have a part that says, well, you're not stupid, right? And he can understand that, but you do think much slower, and that's going to be painful all your life. Actually, I'm still feeling this pain. And we'll, with a compassion, which is the basic, biggest transformer here, with a compassion of the self to the younger self, we can now actually accept the flawed or unacceptable or whatever trait that I have, and I'm back into integration. So the thing is going from splitting, which is the pathological triangle, to integrating, reintegrating this part of ourselves, okay? And we will see that the outcome is kind of feeling more self-confidence, is feeling more protected, more authentic, more a part of society, okay? Like I feel closer to other people. And we will see that in the outcome also in this little vignette I will show. Of course, it's very hard to show a triangle 3 in one 20-minute tape, but we'll try to get the bits and pieces. And this is a very important, and this is really important also. I just want to say something, one more thing, which is really important. And it is that if we think of this, let's say my father is the one who always told me that I'm not smart enough, okay? It's not my real father, God forbid, but let's say for the imagination, okay? It will not be helpful enough, okay, for me to express this towards my father, because that's not gonna change this interaction with the self part that learned this. This is already a concept, it's fixed. Remember memory consolidation? Even if I had these experiences of it being smart, this has not changed. I have this learning that I'm not smart. So expressing it towards my father can be helpful for triangle 2 work, for the relationship with my father. And it may be helpful somewhat for myself, but it's not going to transform this suffering that I'm feeling, of feeling not smart enough every day, wherever I come, with every person. Okay, so what?
Yeah, can I add something to that?
Of
it's
course.
Not even enough if the parent says to the child, but you are smart.
Right.
That won't be enough. It's not enough that the therapist says you're so smart. It's not, it will not convince him, because it's in himself. He has a self-concept. And if he doesn't negotiate and starts to look and reassess and look at the value of himself from self to self, it won't really sink in, and it won't really make the difference. This is very important.
Okay. So this is very important, and I think working with this, and you will see it in the tape, this needs very transforming this. Well, maybe you can say something that in triangle 1, we have these one shots. One session, we go to an event, we transform, and the person is wow. Triangle 2, usually we'd find what we said, Heinz, like 6, 7, 8 sessions, because there are all these different aspects of the relationships, maybe 12 sessions. In triangle 3, we have all these self-concepts, and they're intertwined and they're touching each other. So this is a much longer process, okay? And it's many times it's also hard to do the whole transformation in one session, because you will see, maybe it takes a lot of time to connect to this child and to his understandings, and the hour is over. And next week, we're going to work with this child and start doing some kind of reassessment. Maybe we will do part of it. So this would take, I don't know, the patient that I'm showing you, that I will show you today, it probably took, we did 25 sessions of this type, and we're about a year after now, and he's much better. But it took time. It took time. It really takes longer, and these transformations are very strong when they happen, but we need many of them, because all of us have countless negative self-concepts, and they are triggered in different situations and different circumstances, okay, during our life.
I don't know how much you still have to tell. I think one thing
just the markers, and that's it. Okay?
Yeah, and one thing, like how one event can cause all 3 types of pain. That's also,
yeah, that's also important. Okay, so two things. So I just briefly say the markers of triangle 3 would be all this, a lot of hiding. Social anxiety usually is very connected to this, right? I I'm sure that these feeling of loneliness, and we see what we call the imposter syndrome that I was talking before, right? Somebody will sometimes see what's really underneath and then, oh my God, boom, okay? And so this can bring a lot of anxiety and a lot of obsession about succeeding, and a lot of energy in actually trying to not be who I am and have masks, and a lot of self-attack sometimes that we see. I'm shit, I'm unlovable, nobody would ever choose me as his partner or as his friend. And I always feel a stranger. I never feel part of any social group. When I'm there, I always feel kind of, I don't really belong. I don't. So this is this kind of loneliness. I'm also we also, one more thing that we've said on the triangles that we're using, Les Greenberg, who I'm really glad to see is here, the alone in the forest, you know, all afraid would be triangle 1, and alone in your crib with nobody changing your diaper, nobody taking care of you would be triangle 2 loneliness, and triangle 3 loneliness would be, you know, alone in a cocktail party, or alone in a big family gathering, or alone in all that, which we all feel so much. I think this kind of loneliness is a big issue in society today for sure, and would probably always. And how can one event, and this is very important, many events create more than one triangle. If we take the classical event of parents abusing their child, okay, we'll take this event. So we can see there's definitely a triangle 1, because the emotion is unbearable. There's definitely a triangle 2, because I am being attacked and I'm losing the connection with my parent. My parent who's supposed to protect me is actually attacked, triangle 2, right? That's what I said. And there's a big chance, or 100%, that there's going to be a triangle 3, because I'm not worth of love. I'm worth of attack. That's how children see it. So we can see that this, and just one more word, or you're going to say that, Hans?
No, I was saying betrayal, don't worry.
Okay, so no, and the other thing is that many times when we start working with a patient, we have to be very sharp in the session to see which pain is activated, because sometimes one pain will block another one. The classical example is that I take a person and I want him to say to his parent that he deserved more love, or he is angry that they never took care of him. But he's so embedded in the self-attack that he doesn't find himself deserved for that. So I might need to do some triangle 3 work in order to go back to triangle 2, and the vice versa, okay? So we really have to see which pain is activated. And sometimes it will block us in trying to do, and then we re-navigate. So this is the basic idea we wanted to bring. And then Hans, there are a few things you wanted to say, right? We're back to your presentation.
Yeah.
Wow, so I hope this was speed teaching. But you can see we're really enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, maybe we could take like one question or something, just have a little bit break before we go on our train. If there's any question,
comments,
wants to ask or comment, whatever. Otherwise, if not, then we will continue.
We will be very glad to have comments or questions.
To interact and to clarify if there's. Okay, Jerry, please.
Hi, Hans. Hi, Netta. Good to see you. Good to be here. Good to be here in the audience, and
yeah, nice.
to be hearing you sharing your ideas. I just wanted to share again. I don't know if this is directly connected, but as I hear you share about this model, I'm reminded of a little bit of some of Lee McCullough's writing, where there's sort of this hierarchy of functions within. In other words, this idea of there can be a phobia of the affect itself, right? That would be triangle 1. There's the phobia of closeness, which would be triangle 2. And then there's the phobia of loss of identity, which might be triangle 3. So I'm just aware of these different hierarchies, and also aware of whether you guys have any thoughts about whether it's possible to make these transformations stick when you're working on a fear of a feeling, when it's more deeply embedded in an identity at the identity level, whether you need to go for the identity piece first to get a more comprehensive transformation, and that might, reduce the valence or charge on some of the just the fear of the affect itself, because the identity itself is not being clung to in some kind of way. Do you have a sense of one being sort of like, in Zen they say the most important thing is to remember the most important thing, right? So does the deep pain that's related to the self-to-self identity triangle feel like that's sort of at the roots of all? Do you see it in that way, or are they just three varieties of pain? I'm just curious about that.
I think there are more three varieties of pain in the sense, but at every person, one of these pains can be more severe or more dominant in this time in his life. So you would have to see if you can first transform it in order to transform the others. So it's really connected to moment tracking in the sense that you have to see what is activated at the moment. And I can think of my life or other people, which in different circumstances, different kind of pains were more dominant. And I had to go through and work and then go back. It's an ongoing process. It's more for directing the intervention in the session, or if I'm more, it's not just one session. Usually it's like a period of time when you can see these triangles in. And I think in what you said about Lima Kulo, that we're integrating many things that we didn't even invent one thing here, I think. Maybe the specific work in the dialogue in Triangle 3 is something that I guess we came up with, which is more original, but I'm not even sure of that. But we're just integrating ideas that came from many different ways. In terms of ADP, we're kind of splitting the triangle of experience to three different triangles, which I think is very helpful, because otherwise it's very confusing, right? And I think that's important. And you can see that each triangle has a different language, like the language of needs is much more in Triangle 2, okay? And will be more active, which and can be very helpful. So since we put it on, we saw that many different theories actually are contributing to it and can actually become more orderly if we think of it that way. So yeah, I saw Ruth has a question, right? Ruth, Karen.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you. It's so lovely. Thank you, both of you. It's amazing, amazingly beautiful. And I felt the word existential when you spoke about the self-pain. It's really existential. But I have a question about the second one. And since the transformation is the expression of the emotion towards the attachment figure, how would you work with the avoidant attachment who does not even feel that he doesn't even feel that he has to express any emotion? And I wonder about that.
Hans, do you want to answer?
Yeah, well, what you're asking, Ruth, is of course very relevant, and all these intricacies of how you work with this is not different from other therapies. The idea is that if you have an avoidant attachment style, you know that you're working in this realm of attachment problems, and then you have many. The nice thing of this model, I think, it's not even model; it's like just organizing things. So is that you can find it back everywhere. So once you know, okay, so we have an issue that is attachment related or has this avoidant characteristics, I can go to many theories and pick up, okay, let me see here what they do within this kind of work. So it actually organizes that. This problem, what you're saying, being avoidant attachment style and not even feeling the need, you will find it anyway if you're in any therapy, and there are many ways to deal with that.
But I do think there's one more thing we can say. Then what we can actually see is that the defense is right, avoiding connection in order not to. So we would probably work, I don't know, in ADP relationally to start, right, activating this thing or whatever technique we will use. Yeah. Yeah, but it's not that we're yeah, like Hans said, it's not that in these triangles you can work with very many different strategies. You just know what kind of pain you are actually dealing with. Yeah.
So answering also a little bit to Jerry, like it's not about if one pain is deeper than the other, like triangle 3 pain is not deeper than triangle 1 pain. It depends on the patients. There are patients who have like the deepest triangle 1 pain, and they don't have so much triangle 3 pain. They just think that something terrible happened to them, but they don't take it out on themselves. So that's actually possible. So I think I'm going to give some more of my presentation, which will bring back a little bit of these questions, I think.
Okay, and then do we have time for more questions?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
We're still quite okay on time.
Okay.
I should talk about 15 minutes, I think. Let's see. Are we good?
Yep.
Okay. So, and I think also what is important that we shouldn't get too hung up on the theory. Like if it's trying, you know, if it's like this and if it's like that, if it's triangle 1, if it's triangle 3, theoretically there's still things that have to be put into the right place and might not be exactly in the right order. But the essence of this is that if you divide between these 3 pains, then you know both theoretically and clinical, it can help us to choose our interventions and design our transformational path. That is the most important part of this. So within these 3 types of pain that transform differently, we now know something about how to choose portrayals, but not only. What came as a kind of a bonus for us, that it's now also very easy to understand what to use, what kind of interventions from other experiential therapies. And we can select and integrate our work, into our work. And we can see that there are kind of clusters of interventions for a particular kind of pain. And finally, we believe that looking at the active pain in the session also has important implications for memory reconsolidation, because now we can be more specific about what kind of contrasting experience we need in MR.
And what is the learning?
And what is the learning?
Specifically, what is the learning? Yeah.
Yeah. And we may resolve some existing questions about memory reconsolidation. So I'm going to look at these 3 things in some more detail now before we go to a little bit more of discussion. So if we look at portrayals, like Netta explained, we know now what kind of transformation to look for core emotional pain. The portrayal is about finding regulation and completion with the help of new resources. So the setup of the portrayal is a self in the problematic state or event, but now with new resources. In relational pain, the corrective experience needs to be in the context of direct interaction with the other who caused the pain, and thus we use a self-other setup. In self-pain, the change comes from changing how we look and relate to ourselves. Thus we aim for a self-self interaction. Now, this is not a strict formula to do portrayals, right? It's just we continue to follow emerging experience moment to moment, but now we know what is a crucial experience that we eventually will have to find in order to get a complete transformation. Now I'm going to show you a little bit of these clusters, and I hope that you're familiar with them, but then you're going to get a little bit of the feel of how you can actually use things and integrate things from other psychotherapy models. So we believe that identifying the emotional pain is also very relevant for psychotherapy integration, as we can quickly see what might be adequate interventions from different approaches. So here are a few examples of interventions from a number of therapies that in different ways provide resources, promote regulation and mobilization. So here they go. So I'm just going to mention them because of course we cannot explain all these. But so here there are two from somatic experiencing, titrating and pendulation, from IFS, the unblending and the unburdening, from ISTDP, the capacity building and the recapping, from EFT, retelling trauma, empathic affirmation and self-soothing would be the most adequate and indicated ones, from ADP, dyadic affect regulation, rescue portrayals, and undoing aloneness, and EMDR, the bilateral stimulation. For relational pain, you can see here another cluster of techniques that all operate in direct interaction with an important other, each with different nuances, but again, very compatible. So EFT, empty chair for unfinished business, ISTP, rage portrayals, chemotherapy, limited reparenting. IFS also calls it reparenting, but of course uses little bit different things. And in ADP, the redo and reunion portrayals and receptive affective experiences. And when we look at these techniques in more detail, you can easily import and combine also smaller pieces like phrases and principles from one technique into another. For us, for instance, it's very easy to import them into the portrayals. So here's some examples of techniques and interventions that can be directed at working with the self concept and can lend elements from each other and can be used in combination. So from EFT, a very good technique would be the two-chair dialogue for self-critical split. In IFS, working with critical parts. In ADP, interrelational portrayals and fierce love. In chemotherapy, reframing and reattribution, and in CBT, cognitive appraisal. All these interventions involve some form of compassion or reassessing the value of oneself, and again, very compatible, as many are somehow conceptual in nature. Okay, so we go to memory reconsolidation. A little bit longer, and then we go to the discussion. So with regard to memory reconsolidation, there has some debate about what is the key principle in memory reconsolidation, either emotion or semantic content. Now, Nadel and Greenberg on one side argued that a new emotion event is at the heart of the reconsolidation. And Ecker, on the other hand, argued that memory reconsolidation is rather about disconfirmation of a semantic construal. Now, following our emotional pain model, this division in these three types of pain, we can see this has implications for what kind of new contrasting experience is required to arrive at the right reconsolidation. In triangle A1, so in the core emotional pain, we want to find a contrasting physical emotional experience, and it's about the patient processing his intense emotion, and such a new experience might be regulation or completion from the action tendency. In triangle 2, relational pain, we need a corrective relational experience that is in direct interaction with an important other, for instance, by expression or experiencing connection. And in triangle 3, the self-pain requires a disconfirming experience of the self-concept, which happens at the level of how the patient relates to himself or herself. This may happen through finding a new experience of compassion, reassessment, or in existential acceptance, like we call it. So this means that in the case of triangle 1, the core emotional pain, the change can come from changing emotion with a new emotion. And there isn't much need for conscious insight or semantic processing. It may happen, but people, they get better and they don't even understand really why. If we look at the other end of the spectrum of triangle 3 pain, one cannot change a self-concept with at least some semantic involvement. So this understanding that memory consolidation takes place on different levels of representation of information, I'm going to repeat this sentence, I think it's important, it's complex. So the memory reconsolidation takes place on different levels of representation of information, depending on the type of pain that is being transformed. And this might solve this debate, and it seems to bring some new insight of how memory reconsolidation works on a more specifically. In a way, we might say that each type of pain speaks its own language. So in summary, experiences can be processed through 3 different systems that each safeguards a different evolutionary need: physical, emotional safety, relational safety, and a safety of the bigger group. And each system can cause 3 different types of pain that transform differently. And as we have to speak to it in the language of that system. Okay, sorry, this was a mouthful. I'm aware of this. A lot of information. It's we also hope that it becomes a little bit clearer if you see some video work. But for now, we're open for some discussion and questions and reactions of what you've heard. I don't know, Netta, you want to add something to what I said? I see.
I just one thing in general is that really, I think the idea of it's like it's a different language or it's a different kind of world with that is really the feeling when working with it and working with tapes or in supervision. Finally, I don't know, I use it a lot in supervision. It's very kind of easy to identify, and then you like have it's like a taxonomy in a sense, in that, and which works in the moment. Then you get a lot of information from just connecting these dots. So I think that's really what's like the idea, and I think it's also experientially it feels kind of different. When we were starting exploring it, it's a different feeling, as Hans said, where the pain is. It's inside me, between me and my body, or it is in the relationships, this need for this significant other, which is not happening, or the constriction of not expressing, or this really feeling of like these identity issues of who I am and how good I am and how can I feel connected to the world. So I think that's really in a nutshell, and yeah. So question, comments.
Don't be shy, please.
Please.
Let me react. Thank you for inviting me. You know, a pleasure to hear you.
I think honored, really honored.
I think the third triangle really is novel in terms of looking at triangles. I mean, I've found it, you know, but so attachment isn't everything, but identity is important too, right? In my terms. So it's a pity we have schools, you know, AED.
Really?
I mean, I think it's trying to chase the fundamental processes. But so one of my differences, I think, Hans, is with your representation of the 3 levels of memory reconsolidation. I mean, you know, my fundamental burning issue is that emotion determines cognition.
Mm-hmm.
The way you phrase it, and also Netta, when you talked a bit about the third triangle, it's as though you disconfirm a thought. But to my mind, you have to first have a new emotional experience, which will lead you to disconfirm self-concept. So I still struggle with, you know, you're talking about level 3, the self-pain being more of change at the level of cognition, according to Ecker. You
But
know,
this is-
who knows?
I just
Who
want to
knows?
say, but this is really important. It isn't conceptual in any case. You will see, I think, that in the work, the idea is first we have to activate the pain of this self-concept and the pain of the circumstances. It's really what's there. It's the pain of being excluded and the pain of feeling bad. And then you also have to have this conceptual level on top of it.
Yeah, but I understand that totally, but it's the and also. I'm saying, and also you have to have a new emotional experience.
Yes, of course.
And
Self-compassion,
then,
of course.
and then you will have a new concept. You know,
Yeah,
the way
okay.
you're sort of framing it is you can have a new concept.
Okay.
But, you know, who knows? And I don't want to be too...
I can answer a little bit more. Actually, the way this is the way I put it here, but actually, so in what happens is that in triangle 1, you have this emotional physical. In triangle 2, it's emotional physical plus relational. And in triangle 3, it's emotional physical, relational, and conceptual. So it's actually an add-on. But
Yeah, that's great. Right.
But still, I think that the change of the way we perceive ourselves or look at ourselves can cause an emotional impact. It is a perception of
It's really hard because the self-compassion, Hans, is actually, right, the self-compassion in triangle 3. Somebody's making a lot of noise, I don't know, is not muted, but the self-compassion is actually the engine, which is the new emotion that actually activates changing the concept. Definitely. Without some, and you will see me struggling with this patient. Well, we don't have a lot of time, but to get to this self-compassionate stance, which actually helps also unfolding and unraveling the concept. Of course, I just see them as really connected because thinking the bad thought triggers terrible emotion and feeling the terrible emotion triggers the bad thought. I just see them really connected. And I think that's one of the big challenges in working with triangle 3. And I like your phrase, it's very hard to arrive at the pain there. And you have to go beyond the conceptuals in order to do that. So that's
yeah.
Hans,
what you say about the add-on, I mean, that makes sense. But
yeah, it's an add-on.
Just it on itself, it doesn't come first.
No,
no, it definitely doesn't
very well
come
put.
first. Yeah.
But I think Ecker would argue that it comes
first.
I'm sure he would.
Okay, but thank you.
Thank
It was
you.
wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Yeah. I saw before, Karen, you wanted a question or no? No, okay, I thought, but.
I'm thinking so much, and this is wonderful. And actually, I will say one thing, which is interestingly, I've been really looking at some original attachment systems and have learned about the sociable behavioral system, which was not on my radar. And as I'm listening to you talk about self-identity, there's just a lot coming together in this system, which has to do with relationship to the collective. And so I'm just really intrigued by how that informs identity. So.
Yeah, and I would also want to add from your question that we were used to looking at parents as attachment figures, right? Okay, they are attachment figures, but they're not only attachment figures. They're also social, how do you say this? Social agents.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is another different, not job, wow, my English, task that they have in the relationship to be the social agents of the kids. So they are very, very helpful or not helpful in making these these self-concept in order to help the child connect to the group. So it is, parents do a lot of triangle 3 stuff, but they do it kind of in a different hat than their attachment hat. And this is really also very important, I think, in the discrimination. And maybe that's what you're talking about, this whole sociability system or whatever.
Yeah, interesting.
Any more questions?
I'm muted. No, I'm not.
No.
Hear me?
Yeah.
You know, when you use the example of alone in the woods and afraid, alone when I'm in my crib and no one comes and I'm sad, and then you said alone when I'm at a cocktail party. I would add alone and ashamed when I'm at a cocktail party.
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
Really, I mean, I like that, you know, it's something additive.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when we started to work, the truth is that when we were making this model, it's all started from, well, it started in two paths. One was the work on portrayal and the other was the work on transforming shame. And this is where we actually started coming up. And I do have to say, I did this with another therapist also, Einat Gross, which is not here with us. And we were conceptualizing this shame, the work with shame, because shame is definitely the biggest, like pathogenic, deep shame is really the big marker of triangle 3. Definitely. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay, so do we take the break earlier, Hans, and we'll have a little more
Well,
time for the videos?
we have time for one more question, and then we could break.
Any of the Italians want to ask a question and get it translated? We have all this nice resource of translation. We'll be really glad. Or anybody else?
Yeah, I'll just say something
Hannah.
here. Hi, good
Hi,
morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are.
Yeah.
You know, since Hans introduced me to this way where he, in an understated way, calls it reorganization, I think it's much more profound than that. I just want to say that this has been enormously helpful clinically. You know, just grounds me, gives me a perspective, allows me to see what I'm missing, and when I get stuck, what I might do or where I am. So just, and I'm sure we'll see it in the videos. It's very pragmatically useful. I'm reminded of Kurt Levine's statement, there's nothing so practical as a good theory. And I think it can be said about this work as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. Thank you.
Glad to hear that you put it in practice.
Yeah. We do find it extremely, for me, one thing, I do find it extremely helpful in supervision. It's really so helpful because it was always, you see a tape and you get what's wrong, and then you don't know how to exactly explain it to the therapist. What is he missing? And now it's like, I feel that I kind of have the language, and it allows me to give the therapist, instead of just, you know, okay, you should have done this, like on an intuition, I can explain to him. So I kind of feel that I'm giving him the hook and not the fish when I'm supervising. So it has been extremely helpful in that sense, I think, and also in the clinical work.
Yeah.
Of course, it gets much more messy in the clinic.
Yeah, and sometimes like, oh, is this, is it 1, is it triangle 2, is it triangle 3? But I think that the coolest thing is that you don't have to be right. You can just look at this case and say, okay, what are you doing? Okay, I'm doing kind of a triangle 2 work. Am I missing something? Why isn't this working? Maybe there's actually a triangle 3 at work, like a shame-based thing that I'm missing. Let's go for that. Or am I not seeing how traumatized this person actually is and how much overwhelmed he is by emotions, and I should do more triangle 1 work. So it's also good for asking questions, you don't need necessarily to have the right answer. So that's what I like about it. And so that's practical. So I guess we go to the break.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah, one more and we'll go to the break. We have.
Okay. Thank you for it. It's really amazing and fascinating. And I wanted to know, how do you think about guilty? Because sometimes shame and guilty comes together. So and it might be very deep and very hard to change. So what is just
this model doesn't organize different emotions in different triangles, because all the emotions can be in the same in all the triangles. So it just depends on what kind of guilt. Is it guilt towards an attachment figure? That's one thing. If it's guilt towards the self, or if it's guilt that you just can't handle. Actually, I'm going to show, the tape I'm going to show is going to deal with horror and with guilt. So you will see how we work in triangle 1 with guilt, but it would be a very different work, right, in triangle 2. So we think triangle 1, we will just help her process the guilt, feel the guilt, or in this case, she feels the guilt and it goes to remorse, which is like the more triangle 1 feeling, actually. And then in triangle 2, in this case, it would even be relevant. We might have you express your guilt, right? Or express the anger under the guilt, or express the pain under the guilt, or whatever, towards the attachment figure. And in triangle 3, maybe you will have to become accountable for something you are really guilty about, which you are afraid to feel guilty because it says something bad about you. And maybe we will go to that pain or the shame under the guilt and transform it from that way. So I'm just, it could be 20 other things, but this is a good example of you actually, every emotion can be part, the whole human system is part of every triangle. It's just in a different position and needs a different transformation.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going for a 15-minute break.